Quality education is of prime importance to any individual, and students can go the extra mile to achieve that. Unlike the olden days, the students of this day and age are encouraged to explore and pursue any streams that they are interested in. The education of children is of critical goal for almost any parent in India. However, while providing the best education is a priority, not many parents may actually be able to meet this goal. It is no secret that education is expensive, be it in India or abroad. According to a report by National Sample Survey Office, an average private expenditure for general education has increased by 175% to over rupees 6,788 per student. In an era where the cost of education, be it again in India or abroad, is skyrocketing, it is very much important that you are familiar with the average options, including opting for education loan that might seem like a single best solution. These loans can help anyone who wants to pursue higher education. They are almost useful when it comes to the courses at premier institutions where the cost is a lot. With this, parents can also afford to send their children for higher education, and also students can pay for their own education. So what is education loan? Well, education loan, or also called as student loan, is the amount that can be borrowed by either the parents or the students from banks or financial institutions towards paying for academic fees. Now, this is generally sought for higher education and for specified courses that the student want to pursue in any of the institutions that is located either in India or abroad. Moving on, we'll now understand what are the factors that the banks take into consideration when they receive education loan application. So the first one is academic background of the student. So the banks are when they receive the education loan application, they are most likely to check the marks of the student, how the student performs academically. And they are also likely to check the credit and also the achievements earned by the student, etc. The second one is scores. So the banks also do take into consideration, and they'll research about the course that the applicant has applied for. They'll research about whether the course that the applicant has applied for is credited or not. The next one is institution. The banks also takes into consideration the institution or the university the applicant has applied to. The reputation or the accreditation of the institution or the university you choose to apply to plays a very important role, a very major role when you apply for education loan. The next one is collateral. The banks consider the applicant's ability to pay collateral for the loan. They'll consider what type of collateral they are providing as well as the value of the collateral provided. Now, moving on, we'll understand what are the factors that you as an applicant should take into consideration before applying for or availing the education loan. Repayment tenure. Now, another important aspect to get clarity on is the entire loan repayment tenure. Now, usually the entire loan repayment starts after the student has completed the course for which the loan was taken, or after the student gets a suitable job. Most of the lenders will also give you a moratorium of 6 months period or 1 month period, depending on what's been agreed upon. Now, you need to remember that although you don't have to pay any kind of loan during this moratorium period or the grace period that is provided to the applicant, but it is very much important to know that the interest applicable on the loan will accumulate over a period of time. Thus, it is advisable that you try and pay the interest amount during this moratorium period to lessen the burden on the loan. The next one is deciding the course and the amount. Now, determining the right course from the institution or the university of your choice plays a very major role. In doing so, you will get to know what is the type of job you're likely to get after the completion of the course for which you have taken the loan. Now, once you determine or you know what is the type of job you're likely to get, it will help you to repay your entire loan. Also, you need to consider or you need to compare your chosen course in different universities. In case you're choosing to study abroad, in such a case, compare the courses in different countries as well. Check for the living expenses or travel expenses and any other expenses, and then determine and identify the overall cost that you're likely to bear. Depending on how much of cost you're likely to bear, you can take the loan amount. Abroad education is expensive for students from lower and middle income countries, since the cost of education to living expenses are poles apart from their native countries. One of the questions that often or automatically pops up in the head about abroad education is the possible cost of living. Students take education loan for abroad education, and in many cases, they overlook the expenses that is covered under the loan. This might create a serious issue for students from lower and middle class families, for whom even a slight change in loan amount can make a huge difference in their finances. Like for instance, the cost of living in a city like London can be about 1,300 euros per month, which roughly translates to over 1 lakh per month in Indian rupees. So if most of the expenses aren't covered in the loan, it can create financial problems for the students. Choosing the right abroad education loan involves thorough research for all the available options and covering the expenses. So moving on, we'll now understand what are other expenses apart from the academic expense. What are other expenses that are covered under the education loan? When you're availing an education loan, then it not just covers your academic fees or the course fee, but also other expenses. With that said, in this module, let's understand what are the other expenses that are also covered under an education loan. So the first one is tuition fees. Now, tuition fees amounts to almost half of the total expenses that is borne by the students towards their academic fees. The substantial amount of money that has to be paid to the university is in the form of tuition fees. Thus, most of the banks do cover the cost of the tuition fees in part of the overall education loan, regardless of the fact that whether you're availing a student loan from, say, a government bank or private bank or NBFC or international bank. Now, the main purpose of availing an education loan is to pay the tuition fees for most of the students. The next one is living expenses. Now, this is a very broad category and it involves costs such as the fees or the rent, your monthly expenses, etc. Thus, most of the banks do cover the cost of living. However, the extent of the coverage of this cost depends or it varies from bank to bank. Now, there is no uniformity in the way the expenses are covered. Now, for example, some of the banks might keep a cap on monthly expenditure that can be used by the students on a monthly basis. For example, they might keep the cap on, say, 20,000 or 30,000 in the overall education loan that has been sanctioned to the students. Likewise, there are other banks who have other methods to assess how much of monthly expenditure that can be used by the students. Now, the next one in the list is expenses related to studies. Now, studies shouldn't just be restricted to the overall college education. In fact, if you look at foreign countries, they have a very broad meaning and they also cover costs such as for doing projects, for doing research, field visit, etc. Thus, the cost of an education loan shouldn't be just restricted to, say, college fees or tuition fees, but also overall cost that is related to studies. So, most of the banks do understand this fact and they also provide loan that is related to costs such as for library or for projects or for computer or any other stationeries that you are using or you're purchasing in that overall education loan that has been granted. Thus, it is advisable that you do confirm with your lender whether or not the cost related to studies is covered under the overall education loan or not. The next one is travel tickets. Now, the cost of the travel abroad is in itself a considerable expense that has to be borne by the students towards their education or the studies. If you look at it, then the travel cost usually ranges in lakhs. So many banks do offer loans that covers travel cost as well in the overall education loan that has been sanctioned to the students. Now, when you consider availing a student loan, it caters to different needs of variety of students. Thus, understanding the needs and requirements of students, most of the banks out there offer different types of education loan. With this said, let's now understand what are the different types of education loan that is available to the students or the parents, whoever is availing it. Now, education loan are basically a monetary assistance that is availed by the student to meet their expenses related to their studies. Education loan can be taken by the means of finances, can be taken by the means of funding, rewards, scholarship, etc. And they are granted in the form of cash, which has to be repaid to the lender along with the rate of interest. Now, all the students who wish to take or avail an education loan, they are advised to borrow the money based on their needs, as the repayment tenure or the repayment period for these loans can vary to a great extent depending on the lender and the amount that is borrowed by the students. With that said, in this module, we will look at what are different types of education loan available to students. Now, education loan majorly has 4 sections, which is based on location, based on course, based on collateral, and lastly, based on lenders. No investment bears a higher return than the one on your education. taking an education loan to fund one's higher education, as there are innumerable uses of education loan. With student loans in place, no parent will have to either liquidate their assets or break their savings or even worry about the fact that this loan can be a financial burden to them. Because when they are availing an education loan, or anyone is availing the education loan, they are definitely eligible for tax benefits as well. So this was just a gist of an education loan. To know more about how the entire process of how you can avail the education loan, how you can apply for it, and the entire thing, you can download the Financial Freedom app, which is easily available on Play Store or App Store. So hurry up and download our Financial Freedom app to get in-depth knowledge of not just education loan but also any other products associated with finance. Also, before going, do not forget to hit on the like button. For more such financial content, subscribe to the channel and do not forget to hit on the bell icon to get notified for our next video. Thank you for watching IndianMoney.com. Get wise, break free.